The special thing about the MC of this story is that no matter how many times he dies, he is always reborn again. It's happened so many times that it's not funny anymore, and each time he is reborn in a different world and time, from the most primitive civilizations to those who conquered outer space. This time, our hero's carelessness cost him his life in a battle against a monster, and he was reborn as a baby again. But he's a pro at reincarnation for a reason. Let's see what he comes up with this time. In this current life he's got, he begins to scan his surroundings, and by the looks of the furniture and room decor, he's sure this must be somewhere in the Middle Ages. With the expertise he's built from his past lives, he can tell this isn't Earth, which makes him wonder if he's in a fantasy setting this time. Personally, though, he's found the sci-fi worlds to be more comfortable. They were clean, high-tech, and had other perks. But after taking in his current surroundings, he's at least glad he's not born into a poor family. They've even got maids, which leads him to believe this must be a humble upper-class family in a fantasy world. But more than anything, he's pretty glad that this hot chick is his mother, and he's enjoying every kiss from her to the fullest. Though the language she's speaking is unfamiliar, there's something he can understand without knowing the words. The feeling of her holding him so tightly, out of fear of dropping him, and the warmth in her eyes tells him that he's gotten a loving mother in this life, which is a blessing in itself. You see, through his countless lives, he's met and gotten to know all kinds of mothers, but motherly love wasn't always given. Sadly, he's even been abandoned right after birth, and there was also a time he was exploited as child labor. But this time around, he has a good feeling that this life won't be as hard as many of the ones he's lived. That's when a maid comes in and insists on holding the prince as the lady might be exhausted. The mention of prince catches our boy off guard. He wasn't expecting to be reincarnated as royalty this time. Still, he can't quite figure out why his mother does not look so happy. He gets his answer soon enough when his mother reminds the maid that people might not consider this child a prince. Apparently, this lady, Rifana, had a humble background. She used to be a maid, just like the one before her, named Chenna. She tells Chenna to simply call her by her name, saying there's no need for formalities since no one else is around. Rifana believes the only reason they call this child a prince is because the king's blood flows in his veins. However, the truth is far from honorable. This child also carries the blood of someone of lowly status. She already knows that the nobles and royal concubines have rejected her son, claiming he has no right to succession or power because of her humble origins. Seeing his mother drowning in sorrow, the kid quickly tries to wipe away her tears, which genuinely makes her happy. She thinks it's heartwarming that her baby is trying to comfort her. The maid, though, dismisses it as the actions of an infant simply fidgeting. By the way, our boy goes by the name Arel in this life, and we know for a fact he was indeed trying to console his mother. He personally doesn't care about having no right to succession or loyal followers. In fact, he's glad about it. Being overshadowed means the powerful aristocrats won't give him a second glance, making him practically invisible to the rest of the royal family. This suits him perfectly. He's ready to live the life of a carefree prince with nothing to worry about, and his gut feeling tells him that this 101st life is going to be amazing. The main guy is feeling pretty good about himself because he's got both royal and commoner blood. To him, it's like hitting the jackpot since he just wants a simple life away from all the rich dude's drama. Lady Rifana and Chenna are keeping an eye on him. Rifana looks at him, thinks he seems so happy, and wishes she could keep him that way. But she knows she can't. When Errol hears the word power, he wakes up from his dream and starts sucking his thumb. Errol starts thinking about his situation. In a world where everything is about family and rank, being a prince who can't inherit anything feels like being a pawn with no throne to fight for. He realizes he has no power, no backup, and no future. He figures people will just use him until they get rid of him. But then, he reminds himself that his mom doesn't need to worry because he's confident he can handle things, especially since he was a pro in his past lives. 3 months go by, and Lady Rifana looks at baby Errol while he's sleeping. She thinks he looks like a little angel. She strokes his hair and wishes it felt like the king's. Just then, Chenna tells her the carriage is ready. Rifana quickly kisses Errol's cheek and tells him to be good before she leaves. As the door shuts behind her, we see Errol wasn't really asleep. He was faking it. He laughs but quickly covers his mouth so Chenna doesn't come running in to check. Errol thinks it's tough work being this charming, especially as a baby with everyone watching him. He then sits up, ready to do something no baby should be able to do: power up. He knows time is short, and he needs power to make his life easier. In every world, he knows one thing is always true. Strength is everything. If he's strong, nobody will mess with him. While cultivating, Errol starts thinking about all his past lives and how he didn't waste them. One of his biggest wins was creating a method that lets him train even as a baby, the origin creation Qigong technique. It's something his 30th reincarnation invented, and it's a total game changer. This method lets Errol work on both his natural Qi and origin Qi at the same time. The best part? Nobody can even tell he's training. Errol does some quick math and figures out he'll have 60 years worth of inner Qi by the time he's 10 and 180 by 20 if he keeps this up. Once he gets past the early stages, he won't even need to focus so hard. He could train while chilling in Chaina's arms if he wanted. To speed things up, Errol uses his energy to stimulate his nerves, moving all the Qi to his brain and frontal lobe. The heat from this process spreads through his body, making him sweat like crazy and feel sharp, unbearable pain. As the energy builds up, Errol feels like he's about to lose control. He screams but quickly stops himself. Chaina hears the noise and rushes into his room, but when she looks at him, Errol is lying still in his crib, pretending to sleep. She wonders if he needs a diaper change and leans in to sniff. Errol panics inside, knowing any touch from her might ruin all his hard work. But to his relief, Chaina smells nothing and mutters something about him having a bad dream before walking out. Once she's gone, Errol's body is like a mini furnace, with his energy leaking out everywhere. He struggles to keep it together, feeling like his body might not survive the strain. Nonetheless, he pushes through the pain, determined not to let anything or anyone control his life. Even if it means risking everything, Errol is set on using the origin creation Qigong technique to become powerful enough to live comfortably and on his own terms. Just as he steadies himself, another scream escapes him, loud enough for Chaina to hear outside his door. Chaina suddenly rushes into the room, thinking something terrible has happened. She finds Errol sweating buckets but still lying there, looking like he's peacefully sleeping. Deciding he might need some extra care, she runs off to prepare a bath with herbs. The moment she's gone, Errol jumps to his feet, happy because everything he's been working on is finally paying off. When Chaina returns, she carries him in her arms and says good things to him for being such a strong little guy. Errol just smiles, feeling lucky she hasn't noticed anything unusual. Thanks to his mana concentration technique, his body is constantly absorbing energy even when he's just eating or sleeping. He feels thrilled knowing that in just 3 years, he'll be stronger than most adults. By the time he's 10, his power will be unmatched, and the thought makes him really happy. As Chaina holds him, she hears a strange noise from above, but gets distracted by Errol's cheerful expression. Meanwhile, Errol is already imagining the life ahead of him, powerful, respected, and living like a king. He can't wait for that future to arrive. It's been only 5 months since Errol was born, but thanks to his mana absorption technique, his physical strength and inner energy are leagues ahead of any baby his age. Crawling on the floor, he doesn't stop pushing himself, knowing he's on track to surpass everyone soon. Just as he's focused on his training, Lady Rafana walks in and carries him up off the carpet. She brings him a toy he wasn't expecting, and for a moment, his eyes are glued to it. Seeing her disappointment when he hesitates, Errol quickly starts playing with the toy, pretending to have a blast. Inside, though, he feels secondhand embarrassment for very obvious reasons. Still, Lady Rafana and Chaina laugh at how happy he looks, talking about how handsome and perfect he is. Errol secretly loves the praise but knows it's mostly thanks to his mother's good looks. Even so, he decides to embrace these moments of being the fun baby, knowing this time won't last forever. The baby protagonist suddenly shows them that he isn't happy, and Chaina can't figure out what he wants at first, but all he really wants is food. He starts to cry as he tries to make it obvious. Finally, Chaina guesses right and gives him some milk. While he is busy drinking, the adults start talking about money. They talk about how the funds for the house are running low since yesterday. Even though Errol needs proper food as a prince, there just isn't enough money. The mansion's budget has been cut hard this year, and even raising one child is becoming a struggle. This is quite odd for a royal family. Errol overheard the maids talk about this before. They say his mother, Lady Rafana, will have to eat less to save money for everyone else. If she doesn't, nobody will make it through the season. Errol can't believe it and thinks it has to be a joke. But his mother stays positive, saying it doesn't matter if she doesn't survive as long as others can. Hearing this makes Errol upset. How can they treat his mother like this? She isn't powerful or important in the eyes of the nobles, but she's still his mom. Even though she gave birth to a prince, neither of them have any real status or protection. He starts to understand why she is always going out in the carriage. She's been trying to meet the king. but it seems like she keeps failing. Errol thinks it's cruel. Even if the king doesn't care about her, she is still the mother of his child. How can he let others treat her so badly? He starts crying again because of this, and Chaina hands him over to Lady Rafana, and he calms down in her arms. Even as a baby, Errol wants to help his mom. He knows he can't do much, but he has to come up with something. Winter is coming, and things will only get worse with the cost of heating. In his baby bed, he puts his boss baby brains to work and starts thinking hard about what he can do to help. Then suddenly he gets an idea. As Errol stares at the charcoal in the fireplace, he suddenly remembers that charcoals are made out of carbon, and jewels like diamonds are made of carbon as well, and his brilliant mind sees a way to solve their money problem. If he can turn charcoal into a diamond, he could change everything. Even though he's dying to jump out of the crib and get started, he knows his tiny baby body isn't strong enough yet. Instead, he decides to use his mana to float himself out safely. Nobody else knows that charcoal could be this useful, but to Arl, it's like finding treasure. So he immediately pushes away his self-praise and gets to work while the rest of the house is asleep. Errol focuses his mana, combining it with heat to put pressure on the charcoal. He pours every ounce of energy into compressing it, repeating enchanting spells to keep himself going. The process is tough, and the pressure pushes Errol back, but he stays focused, refusing to give up. He keeps thinking about his mother's happiness when she sees what he's made. Just as he thinks about her, a sudden burst of energy causes soot to explode out of the chimney. Errol moves over to the fireplace, digging through the mess until he finally finds it, a sparkling diamond he created with his own power. The diamond's beauty leaves him speechless. Now, he just needs to figure out how to give it to his mother without making her suspicious. Feeling satisfied, he rests until morning. When Chaina greets him the next day, she's shocked to find Errol walking around outside his crib, covered in ash and soot. She picks him up, confused about how he managed to escape. She assumes he must have been playing all night, but the mess in the room makes her pause. The floor, the fireplace, and the carpet are all filthy, and Chaina wonders if the house has always been this chaotic, or if something strange happened during the night. She tells our boy not to touch the floor, but he doesn't seem to care. He quickly comes up with a plan and puts the jewel in his mouth. Chaina notices something strange in his mouth and asks him to spit it out. She pinches his cheeks, and a diamond falls out. She gets very surprised and asks where he got it and if it was from the floor. Chaina, who looks after the palace treasury, says nothing is missing and that the diamond isn't even listed. So she hugs Errol, saying it seems like he wanted to give it to her. Errol smiles and agrees, with a feeling that his mom would probably like it too. Later, wagons pull up at the palace, filling up the empty kitchen storage with food and firewood. Thanks to the diamond, they now have 5 years' worth of supplies. Lady Rafana worries about who the diamond might belong to, but Chaina assures her that it's fine since the castle was abandoned for nearly 100 years before Lady Rafana took over. She also adds that it could be a blessing meant for Prince Errol. Lady Rafana isn't sure, but she sure feels thankful for the resources. Errol holds onto his mom's dress, thinking she just needs to hang in there until he grows up. He dreams of a future where she doesn't have to struggle anymore. As he clings to her, she promises to make sure the king knows he has a son named Errol. That winter, the fireplace keeps burning, and the palace's finances finally get back on track. The changes are obvious around the palace. One day, while Lady Rafana is eating, she notices the meal is way too much for her and asks about the servants. Chaina assures her everything is fine since Anna, who had quit, is back, and the servants are being treated better now. But what stands out the most to Prince Errol is how his mom isn't looking sad anymore. As he watches her, he thinks she looks prettiest when she smiles. Even though it's the coldest winter ever, it feels warmer to him because things are stable, and his mom is happy. A year passes, and Chaina and Lady Rafana are busy deciding what Prince Errol should wear. They make him try on a bunch of outfits before picking a fancy one. Errol can't figure out why they're making such a big deal about his clothes. Feeling tired, he lies down on the floor and starts whining, surprising both his mom and Chaina. Chaina quickly figures out he needs to rest and tucks him into his crib. Then she says that Prince Errol is going to be officially recognized as part of the royal family. Errol, confused, wonders what she means by recognized. Lady Rafana is happy Errol has grown up without any issues and wonders if the king will show up for his birthday. Chaina reassures her, saying the king is just waiting for the right time since bad things often happen to newborns. Errol overhears them talking and realizes all this fuss is for his birthday. Lady Rafana says not everyone might like the banquet, but it's the perfect chance to officially announce that Errol has royal blood. She's glad the Ernisia royal family rules apply to him too. Errol notices how excited his mom seems and figures it's because of the banquet. Then it hits him. If there's a banquet, the nobles and other royals will be there, and he might finally get to meet the king. The banquet for Prince Arel kicks off that night with a grand feast and an over-the-top party that clearly cost quite more than a fortune. Prince Arel is kinda thrilled to see the lavish decorations, the food, and the fancy outfits the kingdom homie's wearing. Everything feels like a dream to him. Lady Rafana picks him up and asks if he's amazed. Errol thinks this whole thing is definitely a new experience. Shayna points out that it's probably the first time he's seen so many people in one place, and Lady Rafana reminds him that he's the star tonight, giving him a kiss on the cheek. Errol catches the judgmental stares from the nobles and overhears their whispers about him and his mother. But he doesn't let it bother him. His focus is on one thing, meeting his father, King Terrell of Ernesia. Errol burns with frustration, thinking about how the king has never cared about their lives. He decides this banquet is the perfect chance to make sure the king notices him. The atmosphere changes as the royal family of Ernesia walk in, officially starting the banquet. Errol figures this must be the queen and her family. He can feel their strong presence as they approach. His eyes lock onto the queen, her children, his half-siblings, and the eldest son, who stands out the most. There's also a girl acting dramatic, like she's in her own fantasy world. Aurel mentally notes that he needs to learn more about each of them, but they walk right past and completely ignore his mother. Lady Rafana notices the commotion might be overwhelming for Errol and tries to comfort him, even though Errol knows she's probably struggling herself. She still manages to make him laugh, easing the tension. Meanwhile, the crowd is fixated on the queen, admiring her beauty. Errol notices a sudden change in his mother's expression. It had been calm, but now something has unsettled her. He looks around and sees why. The king, His Majesty, finally enters, radiating an intimidating energy that makes Errol freeze for a moment. He can't tell if his father is looking at him or his mom. He thinks it's unlucky that being reborn doesn't come with the ability to read minds. Imagine how great it'd be if he could figure out what everyone else is thinking. After a while, people start giving him gifts and congratulating him, acting like it's such a big deal to see him. But when it's the imperial family's turn, their attitude toward him and his mom is clear. They don't hide their real feelings, and their behavior hits him hard. He wants to jump out of his mom's arms and properly go after that woman. How dare she treat him and his mom like they don't even matter? She clearly doesn't see them as people. Looking around, he realizes everyone here is just as fake and rotten. For a moment, he thinks about shouting and calling them all out, but he doesn't want to make his mom feel embarrassed. He decides to play along and act nice because that's what people expect. Hypocrisy is normal here, unfortunately. All he wants is to leave before he falls asleep in his mom's arms. Just as he's about to drift off, he notices a young girl nearby. She's probably one of the king's concubine's daughters. She seems too young for all this drama, but her presence stands out. Thankfully, some of the mistresses have already left. When the banquet finally ends, he and his mom sigh in relief at the same time. But the night isn't over yet. The queen herself approaches them. She makes it clear that getting near them isn't hard, thanks to her son, the heir to the throne, who is always close by. Errol can't tell if she's bragging about her son or just trying to rub it in. Either way, it's exactly the kind of thing he expects from her. The queen goes on to say how sweet Errol is and how much he resembles his mom, but Errol isn't buying it. He's sure she has something to do with their struggles. After all, someone has to be behind the drastic cuts to their castle's finances. The knights had been turned into lumberjacks just to gather firewood, and Errol's clothes look like they've been pieced together from scraps by the servants. Meanwhile, the queen wishes him a long life and other formal niceties, but as she leaves, she smirks, leaving a sour impression. Then something unexpected happens. Lady Rafana spots the king himself. He asks if she is getting used to the castle, and she gives a polite but not entirely truthful answer, which doesn't surprise Errol. All he wants is for the king to give them the support they need and act like a proper father. Errol starts crying loudly, which makes the king take notice and ask to hold him. It's the first time the king has seen Errol in a year. As he holds him, the king seems kind of confused. Most of his kids cry nonstop when they see him, but Errol just smiles. Errol thinks it would be funny if his charming baby smile could leave the king stunned. The king seems to start liking him a little bit, amused that Errol isn't scared of him. He even says something about raising him in the future. But Errol isn't interested in staying still. He makes gestures, signaling for the king to put him down. The king assumes Errol wants to walk, but Lady Rafana quickly says he can't walk yet since he's only a year old. At that moment, though, Errol decides it's time to prove everyone wrong. He takes his first steps right then and there, knowing he's the star of the evening and needing to show off. The room erupts in excitement as everyone cheers for little Errol's first steps. Even the king seems impressed, realizing Errol is trying to show him something important, that he isn't like other kids. Errol feels confident that this is just the start of proving himself. But as he reaches the table and tries to steady himself on it, he performs an epic fail. The whole table, along with all the food and drinks, comes crashing down. As the plates and glasses come crashing down onto Errol, everyone is freaked out, even the king. But Errol? This was all part of his grand little scheme. Not just to show off that a 1-year-old could walk, but to pull off his perfectly executed dramatic act. He lies on the ground crying like he's in the middle of an epic tragedy, and the king picks him up, checking for injuries. The king sees that Errol's clothes are soaked in wine but finds no real harm. He decides Errol needs a change of clothes. Chaina steps in to help, but the king waves her off, wanting to handle it himself. What he discovers next leaves him speechless. Underneath Errol's stained clothes are undergarments that look more like scraps than anything worthy of a prince. Chaina looks confused, claiming she had dressed Errol in fresh clothes earlier that morning. As the king inspects the fit, he realizes how shabby and pitiful Errol's life must be, and the crowd starts murmuring, saying stuff about it being disgraceful and all. Frustrated by the whispers, the king demands silence, with his voice blasting through the hall and sending shivers down everyone's spines. He looks at Errol's mother, clearly processing how poorly they've been living. Meanwhile, Errol is feeling quite relieved. His plan worked perfectly. His clothes might have been ruined, but they had told the story he wanted. In reality, Errol had been busy that morning. While Chaina was getting him dressed, he used all his tiny strength to stretch and tear at the cloth, making it look as raggedy as possible. It wasn't hard, and with a little magic, he gave his outfit the extra touch of poverty he needed to make his statement. If he were older and stronger, he wouldn't have needed to rely on magic, but it worked anyway. The king finally asks Lady Rafana to explain how things got this bad. How could they fail so much at maintaining their status? But seeing how distressed she is, he doesn't press her for answers. Instead, he turns to one of his officials and asks how funds are distributed for the concubines' castles. The king is disappointed because, as far as he remembers, he'd given clear orders for the budget to be shared equally. Everything was supposed to be running smoothly. So why, at this event of all places, does it look like they've been forgotten? The king can't understand what's going on. He demands the report immediately, wasting no time. Watching all of this, Errol realizes his father is serious about figuring things out, and he's eager to see the numbers in that report. Lady Rafana, Errol's mother, wants to smooth things over, claiming it must be some mistake, and asks for her son back. But Errol knows this is their one big chance. While everyone panics, and the king's secretary pulls up to deliver the documents, the entire room holds its breath, knowing things are about to get heated. When the king looks at the report, he's quite stunned. He can't believe what his eyes are seeing, so he uses his power to set the papers ablaze right there, which shocks Errol. Errol hadn't imagined his father could be so clueless about what's been going on. The truth is, it's obviously all the queen's doing. The king calls to his queen, demanding to know if she was aware of the situation. The queen tries to play it cool, pretending to be just as shocked as everyone else. But the king ain't having it. His intimidating presence grows as he reminds her that managing the budget is entirely her responsibility. Seeing what's up, the eldest son decides to use his perfect timing to pull up and defend his mama. He isn't about to let his mother face this alone and wants to share his own opinion right then and there. The prince tries to explain that this is some big old mix-up, because he's sure his mom wouldn't do something like this. But the king gets even angrier, saying it doesn't matter because a leader is always responsible for their team's mistakes. And thanks to her carelessness, his little brother ended up hungry and without clothes. The older son looks at our hero with these super guilty eyes, which just makes the situation even more awkward. It's clear he's nothing like his dad, who's strong and commanding, or his mom, who's smart and sneaky. The king turns to the eldest son and asks if he's seriously saying his mom had nothing to do with this. Then, without waiting for an answer, he tells his queen how disappointed he is in her. Lady Rafana, trying to defend the queen, keeps saying it's not her fault, instead it's hers, and that she messed up. The king, totally confused now, wonders what she's even talking about. He tells her that just being the mother of his kid should be enough to prove her place in the family. She looks a little embarrassed, and the king gently touches her hand, reminding her to know her role and act accordingly. This whole scene really ticks off the queen and her son, and the king demands that they find out who's to blame and make sure this never happens again. The queen, clearly shaken, looks down at the floor and promises to handle it and make sure it won't happen again. The king gives her one final warning: mess up again, and she'll face punishment. The queen keeps apologizing, saying she'll find the guilty party and make them pay, but she still doesn't seem to get why he's this mad. She then insists she has no idea how this happened, not knowing how to explain herself to Lady Rafana, who is also really stressed out. But the hero sees right through the queen. While his mom tries to say there's no mistake and defends the queen, our protagonist can't figure out why his mom is protecting the one person who probably knows every little detail about what went down. The queen promises this won't happen again, but only our hero realizes that at least she could pretend to look guilty. Instead, she just scares everyone with her power. With that, the hero's birthday ends, and somehow the financial mess is fixed. Later on, it's announced that the queen didn't even have a hand in sorting it out. The culprit is quickly found, a family of low-ranking nobles. They're blamed for everything and, without much fuss, executed on the spot with a guillotine. The palace servants gossip about how the aristocrats even confessed to the crime, but no one can figure out where they'd spend such a massive amount of money. Everyone seems relieved the issue is resolved, except for our baby boy. He can tell the real mastermind has gotten away scot-free. The case is closed, but to the hero, it's totally unfair. He makes up his mind when he grows up he'll teach everyone a lesson. But for now, being a baby with a small body means his main focus is food, so his only response is to cry. Soon he's being spoon-fed and feels pretty happy with his current situation. Still, he knows he needs to work on his body since he's going to be stuck as a baby for a while. But after thinking it over, he realizes all he really has to do is eat and play. Once his belly is full, he decides it's nap time. Sometime later, he wakes up to the sound of a carriage pulling up to the house. He flies to the window to check it out while his babysitter snoozes. He sees a group of people step out, and soon after, 3 of them enter his room: his mom, an adult, and a child. The hero suddenly remembers the babysitter. If she wakes up, his powers will be exposed, so he flies back to her and starts pinching her cheeks to wake her up. The adults immediately walk in just in time to see this, and his mom immediately yells at him to stop tormenting the poor nanny. The nanny notices another mistress has arrived and greets her right away. Our hero spots the newcomer too. The newly arrived mistress quickly says there's no need to apologize because she didn't warn anyone about her visit. Our hero realizes this is Fenelia, another concubine. Everyone starts saying how they would have welcomed her properly if they knew she was coming. But Fenelia says she needs to talk to our hero's mother alone. Our hero's mother can't figure out why Fenelia wants to see her, but assumes it must be serious. While waiting for the serious talk, she ends up choking on her tea. Fenelia, looking genuinely regretful, apologizes for her behavior at Prince Errol's birthday banquet. She explains her family once played a big role in winning battles on the continent and were well known, but those glory days are over. Now, they're struggling because no sons have been born in the family lately, and their reputation has faded. On top of that, rumors say they've been low on money for years. Our hero's mother asks if Fenelia is here because of her family's problems. Fenelia admits they're deeply in debt. She also recalls being pressured by the queen, which probably added to their financial mess. Fenelia pulls out a bag of money, admitting it's not enough to fix things, but says she feels really bad about everything. She admits our hero's mother probably hates her and her family. Just then, the door opens, and Fenelia's daughter quietly appears in the room. It becomes clear Fenelia only wants to shield her child from getting tangled up in conflicts with the imperial family. The mistress calmly says she's fine and doesn't need anything, insisting that Fenelia isn't at fault for any of this. Fenelia asks her not to pity her, but the mistress says she doesn't feel pity, she's just being straightforward. She points out that there's no reason for them to turn against each other now. The mistress makes it clear she understands the situation and doesn't hold any grudges against Fenelia's family. She gives the bag of money back, saying that it would be better spent on something nice for Fenelia's little daughter. She says she understands why Fenelia's family has been trying to manage their palace expenses. Then, she casually brings up some shocking news. She believes the reason behind all of this is that she serves her queen. This revelation leaves our boy stunned, and suddenly it all makes sense to him on why his mother is so disliked by others. He starts walking around his room, thinking about how hard his mother's life must be. Chaina notices he's upset and doesn't know how to calm him down. She asks if he's okay, and he quickly fakes a smile to stop her from worrying. He knows he needs to pull himself together. Chaina just assumes he's just being stupid moody, and goes off to do some exercises with Princess Kania. With everyone distracted, our boy decides to sneakily listen in on the conversation between his mother and Fenelia again. This time, his mother is talking about how she can't escape the queen's oppression. She explains that her main goal is to protect Errol while he's still young, and to stop anyone from hurting their family further. Her tone is more serious and determined than it's ever been. Lady Rafana wants to get closer to Miss Fenelia, but it's clear she has more on her mind than just being friendly. Fenelia sees this, but respects Rafana's determination and agrees. They both figure they can rely on each other when things get tough. Meanwhile, Prince Errol is deep in thought, realizing his mother is fully aware of what's really up between the queen and the concubines, which involves both him and her. But he also wonders what her next move would be. While Errol is lost in thought, a girl suddenly shows up near him, and he has no clue how she got there. He silently begs the universe to keep her away, but instead, she crawls into his bed and starts squishing his cheeks, saying she finds him adorable. She treats him like a squishy toy and even starts moving his crib around like it's a game. Our boy wishes that someone, even if it's Truck-kun, would rescue him from this chaos. Then comes a cat, and at first it seems like the cat thinks Errol is cute too. Errol knows there's no escaping now. The nanny says that the princess might visit. Of course, the princess is eager to come over, and Errol realizes he's on his own with no escape in sight. Time flies, and before long, Errol is almost 3 years old. Life feels like it's moving way too fast, as usual. He can't believe how quickly he's growing up and starts thinking about how much more he has to learn before adulthood. He remembers bits of his previous life and wonders if he'll ever get a chance to relive anything like that. Suddenly, the princess walks into his room. She rushes toward him, but Errol decides to lay a little hide and seek. Unfortunately, she finds him in no time, and he's frustrated and feeling down. But the princess just wants to play hide and seek. Before Errol could refuse, she's already running off to find a bigger spot to play. They end up outside, and it's clear the princess has been visiting a lot since Fenelia came over, with help from the nanny, of course. Errol doesn't mind too much because it seems like these visits are building a strong bond. Even though Errol is still small, Kania believes he's already someone who can be looked after. But she also says that when Errol grows up, it'll be his turn to take care of her instead. The princess makes Errol promise he'll come as soon as possible, but the little prince can't figure out why she's so fixated on him. Before he can think too much about it, Kania says that she adores him. She says playing with him is way more fun than with the others. He's clearly the best choice. Errol laughs, thinking she'll probably regret saying that when she gets older. Kania carries him up immediately, saying it's time to play, and insists on carrying him to their spot. The problem is, Errol feels like he's about to suffocate from her overly enthusiastic help. He silently begs for rescue, and just then, a maid steps in, saying that Errol must be uncomfortable being carried like that. She scolds Kania, saying that even as a princess, she shouldn't carry heavy things yet since she's still a child herself. Errol feels real relief he's finally saved. Although Kania isn't happy at all. She shouts that she wants to play. The maid says she should try drawing or listening to something classical instead, but Kania is sick of all that boring stuff. She says she wants to swing a sword, just like her brother Kyle. Errol notices her practicing with a stick and quickly realizes her balance is way off. The stick's weight is all wrong, and she's not holding it properly. Despite this, Kania is completely into it, imagining she's already defeated some powerful imaginary swordmaster and claiming victory for herself. The maid tries to explain why Kania isn't allowed to practice like Kyle and Lennon. This really upsets the princess, who can't understand why they're allowed but not her. The maid tells her that it isn't proper for a princess to dirty her hands, reminding Kania that she's supposed to be elegant and ladylike. Kania isn't listening, some Mulan vibes. She's already snatched up the maid's sword, and before the maid could stop her, she's talking excitedly about swordsmanship. The maid panics and chases after her, begging her to hand over the sword, or at least just take the sheath instead. Errol stands nearby, and he finds himself liking Kania more and more now. As time goes by, Prince Errol turns 5. He's out in the fields of his land, looking all royal and bold, pretending to race on his mighty steed. But let's not get carried away. He's just rocking back and forth on a toy horse, having the time of his life. Chaina, his maid companion / horse trainer, says he should try riding a real horse, but Errol waves it off, saying it's too risky. Chaina tries to hype him up, telling him a prince his age should be into stuff like riding horses and swinging swords. But Errol is like, nah, princes don't have to do all that. This leaves Chaina feeling bummed because he's not exactly oozing ambition. Here's the catch, Errol's no ordinary kid. This is his 101st life. Yep, the guy's been through the ringer more times than he can count. Over all those lifetimes, he's figured out one harsh truth. Being too good at anything only brings trouble. Every time he's been a pro at something like sword fighting or magic, it's drawn all the wrong people, either wanting to use him or take him down. So now, he's all about staying low-key and enjoying the perks of being a prince without breaking a sweat. Back at the castle, Errol tells Chaina he needs some alone time, and she agrees, though she's not thrilled about it. Once she's gone, he shuts the door, kicks back, and just lies there doing nothing. Later, they end up in a bit of a pickle. Chaina's frustrated, asking why he hates studying so much, pointing out that a 5-year-old prince should be eager to learn and grow. But Errol's totally not interested, don't care about the world, and definitely not into cramming knowledge. Chaina sighs, half joking that he sounds like someone who's lived 100 lifetimes. Before she can go on, Errol cuts her off and assures her it's not her fault he's like this. Deep down, he decides it's time to just enjoy life for once. YOLO vibes? Not for Errol. It only took him 100 lives to figure out how to kick back and take it easy. Maybe he's just a chill guy, who knows? Chaina reminds Prince Errol that by royal rules, he has to start studying now that he's 5. She pulls out some super basic books, saying they were picked just for him. But Errol, looking all moody, grabs one and shows off his book skills by spinning it around like a toy. Chaina's totally pissed, telling him books are for reading, not spinning. She even tries the guilt trip, saying regular dudes would love to learn but don't get the chance. But Errol doesn't give a care in the world. He starts stacking the books into a mini-house instead. Chaina, trying to hold it together, tells him to knock it off and sit back down, but Errol's not listening at all. When words don't work, he goes full drama mode, whining and yelling that he won't study. Suddenly the doors open and his mom walks in, looking like she's had enough. And let's be real, nothing stops spoiled brats faster than a mom's "I'm gonna kill you" stare. Under her watch, Errol drags himself to the library and starts studying, though not without some complaints. Even while pretending to study, Errol's thinking about how ridiculous this all is. He knows that if his parents really cared about him learning, they'd make sure he was protected. But in his world, being good at anything is just asking for trouble. The more talent a kid like him shows, the more dangerous life gets, for him and everyone around him. Errol doesn't think it's fair, but life is what it is. All he wants is a chill, lazy life where no one's at risk. As he zones out, Chaina snaps him back to reality, telling him to study hard and make people proud, as if that's going to solve anything. Errol thinks about what Chaina says but decides it's a bit much for him. Chaina doesn't let it go, though, telling him that if he keeps acting like this, his mom's going to feel sad. That hits a nerve, and Errol finally decides to put in some effort for his mom's sake, not because he suddenly loves studying. Even so, he's firm on one thing: no sword training, no magic lessons. He's had enough of dealing with the chaos that comes with being gifted. Instead, he starts thinking about other, less risky plans for his future. A few days later, a fancy carriage pulls up at the concubine's place. Chaina tells Errol that a mage from the magic tower is here to check his mana. If he's got the talent, they'll start teaching him magic. That's bad news for Errol. He knows any decent mage would sense the crazy amount of mana he's hiding. He figures the only way out is to keep his mana under wraps. As he walks down the hallway to meet this tester, he keeps his head down, trying to look as plain as possible. Chaina tries to cheer him up, saying even if his mana isn't super impressive, he can still work on it. But when they open the door, the tester's face says it all, shocked, like they just saw something they weren't ready for. The mage stands up quickly and looks right at Prince Errol. As they size each other up, Errol watches the mana flowing through the mage, wondering how he looks in the mage's eyes. The mage grabs Errol's arm to check his vitals and says that something feels off. Chaina, trying to hype him up, asks if Errol is special, but the mage isn't sure whether to call him special or just plain weird since he can't sense any mana in Errol at all. Even after trying to probe with mana, the mage finds nothing, leaving Chaina completely shocked. Errol leans back in his chair, feeling all chill about how well he's hiding his mana like some last-stitch secret weapon. Before walking into the room, he had used his chi to compress his mana and push it to the edges of his body. When the mage looked surprised earlier, Errol knew his plan was working. The idea of someone from a royal bloodline having no mana didn't make any sense, and Errol had totally thrown him off. The mage tells Lady Rafana that Errol has no potential for magic, leaving her confused. He adds that even commoners have a tiny bit of mana, but Errol doesn't seem to have any at all. Some Rock Lee and Guy vibes. After hearing this, our boy starts to wonder if he went a little too far. Lady Rafana looks crushed, realizing her son might not have what it takes to become a mage. But this is exactly what Errol wants. He's playing the long game, making everyone think he's totally useless with mana. As he sits there pretending to sulk, he knows this is just the start of his act. The next day, Errol meets his new swordsmanship trainer, a young knight named Landfill Tagaron. Errol takes one look at him and silently judges him as boring and weak, not even close to his level. In his past life, Errol had fought monsters and survived brutal battles, so this guy doesn't impress him. Still, Errol decides to play along, agreeing to train and encouraging both of them to grow stronger together, even if he's not expecting much. Errol secretly thinks this whole training thing is more for Landfill's sake than his own. He's definitely not interested in doing anything too hard. Like his sister Kania, who walks around wearing weights to get stronger. So many Rock Lee references in this. The dude explains that intense training like that is a tradition for the Kinchester family, but Errol says it sounds like something martial artists would do, not royalty. When Errol asks about the plan, the swordsman dude explains that swordsmanship isn't just about strength, it's also about balance and flexibility. To prove his point about flexibility, Landfill flexes on them kids, showing off some fancy sword moves and suggests starting with simple exercises, like balancing on logs. Errol immediately complains about being scared of falling, even though the logs are barely off the ground, but Landfill assures him that even if he does caplunk, it won't hurt. Errol then asks what he's supposed to do since he's afraid of heights. Next, they move on to flexibility training. Landfill assumes Errol would have no problem since he's still a kid, but Errol shocks him by struggling to even touch his toes. The swordsman dude doesn't give up. He decides it's time to practice with wooden swords. He explains how to use centrifugal force to swing properly. Errol gives it a try, but his grip is so bad the sword goes flying. Landfill looks stunned as Errol completely messes up the exercise. Errol, pretending to be crushed, tells Landfill he's hopeless at swordsmanship. But Landfill encourages him, saying it's only his first try and he'll get better with practice. Handing him another sword, they continue the session. The whole time, Errol is very aware of someone watching him. His clumsy performance is all part of his plan to spread rumors about how bad he is, making sure word gets around the city. Rumors are flying among the nobles that Prince Errol is even worse off than commoners when it comes to mana. People are saying he's failed at every kind of training, and he's so clumsy he could trip over nothing. While some find it hilarious, it's not doing Errol any favors. At the concubine's castle, Errol is chilling with cookies and orange juice. Kind of a surprising combo for medieval times, when he hears about a new private tutor coming to teach him. The gossip about him being useless has scared off most tutors, so Errol's curious about who's brave, or crazy, enough to take the job. He looks out the window just in time to see the tutor stepping out of a carriage. A few minutes later, he finds out the guy's name is Gamel Pernia. The vibe in the room immediately gets awkward, with Gamel stuck teaching someone everyone thinks is hopeless, and Errol already bored out of his mind. Errol sighs and figures they might as well start with literature, focusing on foreign and common languages. Gamel piles up books in front of him and says basic grammar should only take a day to learn. But since Errol's reputation is so bad, Gamel gives him a few days instead, acting like it's no big deal if he can't get it right. This annoys Errol, so he promises to give it his best shot. Gamel keeps talking, saying bad grades don't always mean someone isn't trying. Sometimes, it's just how the brain works. He basically says it's not Errol's fault, but the backhanded compliment feels worse than outright criticism. Errol starts feeling the weight of people looking down on him. Sure, he wanted everyone to stop expecting so much from him, but he hadn't expected their pity to sting so much. Late at night, Errol goes ninja baby mode and sneaks into the library, feeling himself about his top-tier language skills. Thanks to hundreds of past lives, he's been fluent in multiple languages since he was a toddler. As he walks through the library, he wonders if he should let everyone know just how much of a genius he really is. He focuses mana in his hands and starts searching for books on vocabulary and grammar, using magic to pull them off the shelves as he walks by because he's too midgety to reach. He doesn't stop there, though. He grabs books in foreign languages too, trying to know even more than he already does. With everything neatly stacked on a table, he gets to work. Flipping open a book, Errol thinks about how all languages follow the same basic rules. He's lived 100 lives, and in every one of them, he's been busy learning. That night, starts studying hard, very much determined to show off just how smart he is the next day. A few days later, Gamel pulls up, saying his jokes have gone too far and asking if he really understands the common language. Errol sighs and says he's not lying, even trying to prove it by reading something. Gamel feels like he might have just memorized some passages, but Errol says to him that even memorizing a whole language would be impressive. Considering how tricky the kingdom's official language is compared to others, Gamel challenges him to pick a random book and read it. He points out that even the smartest kids need to be at least 12 to handle basic reading, and Errol's only 5. Errol immediately grabs a book and reads it flawlessly, leaving Gamel in total shock. Gamel is quite overwhelmed and even starts tearing up, calling Errol's talent extraordinary. After all, when a student excels, it makes the teacher look good too, you know. Errol tells his teacher that he should feel lucky to have such a genius for a student. Fired up loads, Gamel jumps into the day's lesson, ready to teach his brilliant pupil. By the next night, the rumors about Errol take a wild turn. Where people used to mock him for being clumsy and useless with a sword, now they're all hyped about how he mastered the common language in just 2 days. Rumors start flying here and there about how Errol can solve math problems in his head like it's nothing. And just like that, the legend of a genius Errol is born. But where did these stories come from? Turns out, down at a local tavern, someone's been spilling the tea, or beer rather. Gamel, Errol's tutor, is sitting there, a little too tipsy, bragging to anyone who'll listen about how he always saw the prince's potential when everyone else didn't. He's going on and on about how hidden talents just need the right teacher, aka him, to shine. Before long, word about Errol's smarts makes its way to the king. The king is pretty amazed and talks with Lady Rafana about how their son might have struggled with all the sword and magic stuff because it just wasn't his thing. Lady Rafana apologizes for causing any worry, but thinks that, as his mom, she should have realized how special he was sooner. The king, seeing her concern, reassures her. They share one of those heartfelt and very cultured moments that would make the queen need eye bleach, and he tells her he's sure their son will grow up to do amazing things. Meanwhile, our boy is out here eavesdropping on the whole conversation, thinking to himself that, yeah, he'll do just enough to keep the king impressed, pick a good spot in life, and have some fun while he's at it. And so, Errol kicks off his 101st life, this time as a brainiac prince. A few days later, he notices more guards hanging around outside the concubine's castle. It doesn't take long for him to figure out that since he can't fight or use magic, the king probably sent them to keep him safe. Errol feels a little proud, guessing the king's in a pretty good mood. But then, some loud sound behind him grabs his attention. Chaina has dropped off a massive chest, and his mom explains it's a gift from the king. Errol immediately opens it and finds it stuffed with gold coins, shiny jewels, and all kinds of treasures. As he's digging through, something catches his eye, a unique-looking necklace. Chaina asks if it's the priciest thing in the chest, but Errol decides it's not about the cost. This necklace is the coolest thing in there by far. Errol puts on the necklace and says it gives you big brain time and also helps you think faster while keeping you from getting tired. Chaina is super impressed, thinking it's all because of how hard Errol's been studying ladle, but he just makes it look like it's no big deal. The truth is, while the necklace looks pretty basic to everyone else, Errol can see the mana-triggering gadget hidden inside the jewel. Not that he needs it, but his inner chi does way more. As he does stuff with the necklace, he starts thinking about Kania, who's been working out like crazy for her sword training and is now seriously ripped. He asks his mom if he can give the necklace to Kania, and she gently pats his head and says that since it's a gift from the king, giving it as a present would probably make the king happy too. She then asks what Errol likes about Kania. He says it's her strength, which makes all the maids burst into a mad laughter. That day, the whole concubine's castle is booming with joy, knowing that Errol is not only recognized but also favored by the king. The young knight even brags about it to his fellow guards, reminding them to take pride in being part of the concubine's castle. A few days later, Arel is sitting in the dining hall with Chaina. She tells him all the desserts he requested are ready and asks what he thinks of them. Arel tries one after another but isn't happy with any of them. He's annoyed and keeps searching for something better. Chaina encourages him to slow down and enjoy the treats, asking if they taste good. Errol, frustrated, says none of them are sweet enough because they're all missing what he's looking for. Chaina, confused, says these desserts were made by the best chefs and offers to bring one over to fix the problem. That's when Arel has a light bulb moment. What he needs isn't a chef, he asks for an alchemist instead, which just surprises and confuses Chaina. Prince Errol starts spacing out, thinking about Coca-Cola and snacks from his old life, practically drooling, just imagining the taste. He figures he'll need an alchemist to recreate cola, but that's easier said than done. Chaina, super confused about why he'd want an alchemist, asks him what's going on. Errol freezes, realizing she must have heard him daydreaming out loud. He thinks about explaining but quickly decides it'll sound way too weird, especially since he's only 5. Instead, he starts putting together the problem. The kingdom doesn't have the right seasonings or fancy techniques needed to make something like cola. The more he thinks about it, the more he realizes how tricky it'll be. Making cola isn't just mixing stuff together. It needs all these extra steps he can't even do yet. Feeling bummed, he starts fantasizing about the fizzy, sweet drink again. But then he snaps out of it and reminds himself that he's supposed to be a genius scholar. If anyone can figure it out, it's him. He suddenly jumps up and bolts out of the room. Chaina stares after him, completely lost, and asks where he's off to. He yells back that he's going to study, leaving her scratching her head, wondering if she even heard him right. Errol, meanwhile, is sprinting through the castle, laser-focused on one thing: chemistry. He knows cooking and chemistry go hand in hand, so he's convinced alchemy is the key to cracking the cola code, no matter how tough it'll be. Fast forward 3 years. Now 8 years old, Prince Arel is running a meeting, sitting at the head of a big table. They're talking about building new bridges in areas where merchants travel a lot. One of the supervisors asks what he thinks about the plans. Errol checks out the blueprints, compliments how impressive they look, and then casually asks who designed them. When a supervisor proudly claims credit, Errol's expression changes. He threatens to fire the guy if he ever shows up with another useless design. The room? Dead silent. Prince Errol points out a few problems in the bridge design, saying that while it might work for now, it'll be a disaster when snow piles up in the winter. The weight would crush the wooden parts underneath because the designers cared more about making it look fancy than keeping it safe. Our boy makes it clear that while the kingdom should look impressive, safety has to come first. He demands they redo the design and then moves on to the next blueprint. With his crazy amount of knowledge, Errol's workload is kind of shooting through the roof. The so-called experts in the room can't hold a candle to him, but they've decided to trust this 8-year-old genius anyway. Our boy feels a little bad for them, but he knows he's got no choice. He has to keep proving himself. After the meeting, as Errol heads out, a new maid spots him and calls him by his latest nickname, the Young Gray Sage. He's instantly horrified and thinks it's the cheesiest thing ever. Realizing the maid must be new, he tells her not to use that nickname again because he can't stand it. She promises to remember, but as he walks off, she almost messes up and says it again. Errol, now extra annoyed, silently swears that nickname is the lamest thing he's ever heard. As his carriage moves off, Lady Rafana looks out the window and asks Chaina if Arel is heading somewhere important. Chaina tells her that he's going to see the king, which makes her wonder what they'll talk about. Chaina hesitates, almost saying that Errol is interested in learning alchemy. Meanwhile, up in the carriage, our boy is busy imagining how the king might react when he drops his alchemy request out of nowhere. Even though his audience request was approved right away, Errol figures the king must trust him now, especially since he's been handling so many responsibilities like a pro. Prince Errol stares out the window, trying to shake off the nerves. Even after living through 100 lives, the king's aura still feels overwhelming. He keeps reminding himself to stay calm and not mess up when it's time to talk. When the king asks why he wants to learn alchemy, Errol explains it's because he wants to help the kingdom and the king more. Since he's no good with swords or magic, all he can do is gain knowledge and put it to use. The king listens carefully, impressed by how thoughtful Errol is, and agrees to his request. He promises to connect Errol with some reliable alchemists, and even asks if there's anything else he needs. Errol politely says he'll ask later if something comes up. As the king smiles warmly, Errol feels pretty chill, knowing his plan worked perfectly. Word spreads fast, and soon all the best alchemists in the kingdom show up, eager to prove themselves and maybe earn some recognition. It's no surprise when Demon Ranchette gets picked. He's known for creating these crazy reflective mirrors that bounce sunlight super far, which he installed on the western fortress to keep invaders away. A few days later, Errol meets Demon in the garden of the concubine's castle. Demon casually compliments the beauty of the garden, but Errol is more focused on him. Based on his legendary reputation, Errol expected some old, wise-looking alchemist, but Demon turns out to look surprisingly young. Noticing the confusion, Demon explains that his hair turned white years ago after a little accident with toxic fumes. Our boy realizes that Demon almost lost his life while learning. Demon, staying calm, warns Errol to be ready for the risks. If anything happens to the Our boy during experiments, Demon for sure knows he'll be held responsible, maybe even with his own life, or worse. Demon explains that alchemy is way harder and more dangerous than Errol probably thinks. He even points out how young Errol is, but before he can finish, our boy cuts him off. He tells him that he knows what he's getting into. Alchemy isn't magic, it's science, and he's not chasing silly dreams like turning rocks into marshmallows or going miracle mode by turning into wine. What he really wants is practical tech, methods to clean iron ores and create stronger metals for the kingdom. Demon is blown away by Errol's ambition and sharp thinking. He feels this kid is destined to lead the kingdom of Ernesia someday. After being inspired by Errol's speech, he kneels before our boy, telling him that although his skills are lacking, he'll teach him everything that he knows. A few days pass since alchemy class kicks off, and Prince Errol is deep in his studies when Demon suddenly asks if he's done this alchemy stuff before. Errol gets caught off guard, thinking maybe he's been showing off too much, but he quickly changes the subject, saying he just read about it in a book. Demon seems cool with that and even says Errol matches the rumors he's heard. Errol feels relief because of his genius scholar act is working. The two of them end up grinding all day, every day, from sunrise to sunset. As they dig into their research, Errol figures out that you can harden iron by throwing in some eggshells or bone ash. He shares this discovery with Demon, and they keep making progress. Later on, Errol learns how to extract lead and other stuff. He also notices that, aside from some special metals and medicines in this world, everything else is pretty much the same as what he remembers from his past lives. He talks about how lucky it is that the rules haven't changed. Demon hears him and asks what he meant, but Errol tells him that he was just talking to himself. With everything going according to plan, Errol sends a letter to the king asking for more alchemists. The king doesn't waste time and agrees, telling his men to gather the best alchemists in the kingdom. But there's a teensy tiny problem. One of the king's advisors kinda hesitates, cause he's worrying about complaints over the budget, but the king shuts that off immediately. He trusts Errol's work will be worth it and good for the kingdom. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom, Errol says he's going to create a carbonated drink, a soda. The alchemists are surprised and ask if he's seriously planning to make food. Our boy happily says that's exactly what he's doing. He starts explaining some basics, but before he could get too far, the alchemists start feeling disappointed. They came here hoping to achieve big things and bring honor to their families, only to end up making snacks. One alchemist even complains about giving up his cushy, huge professor job at the Alchemy Academy just to get turned into chef's apprentice. To calm them down, our boy promises they'll be well paid no matter how things turn out. That does the trick, and the alchemists start tossing around ideas. First, they figure they need carbonated water, which naturally exists in some parts of the kingdom and can be brought in pretty fast. Our boy notices these guys aren't exactly driven by passion. They're just happy as long as they get paid or earn some fame. Still, he knows they'll be useful for speeding up his research. A few days later, wagons loaded with barrels of carbonated water roll in from all over. This makes our boy very happy, and Demon pops open one of the barrels, but the nasty smell makes him cringe as he asks if they're really supposed to drink this. Errol tells him they need to test if it's drinkable, but after checking the first barrel, he almost gags and decides it's a no-go. The water's an epic fail. He checks the other barrels and yup, they're all terrible. But our boy doesn't lose his cool. He tells everyone they'll have to make artificial carbonated water instead, causing a buzz among the alchemist homies. He hands out papers with some theories, saying that they could crack the problem if they dig into these clues. Seeing how serious this is, Errol reassures them, saying they're the best alchemists around and will figure it out in no time. When he turns to Demon for some backup, his response doesn't exactly scream enthusiasm. These alchemists really are the top-tier brains in Ernesia. Feeling good about things, Errol leaves the room, telling them that messing around with theories and testing stuff should be their happy place, so he won't hover around. Still, he wonders if they can pull this off in just a week, but figures the challenge will only make them work faster. A few days later, Errol is really excited as he tells the alchemists this carbonated water will bring energy to the kingdom and also summon in piles of cash. The alchemists aren't so sure, secretly wondering if it's all dumb hype. But Errol's very surprised when he sees they've already managed to make artificial carbonated water. Our boy grabs a container and is ready to taste it himself. Demon and the others are curious if this stuff will really catch on. The water has a strong kick but no flavor, so they're skeptical. Errol quickly clears it up, explaining it's not meant to be drunk plain, they'll mix it with fruit juice or alcohol. His original dream was to recreate cola, but since he couldn't get the cola fruit, this fizzy alternative would have to do the job like a substitute teacher. To start, Errol squeezes up some lemon juice into the fizzy water and takes a little sip. The taste hits just right, like Goldilocks and the Bears kinda right, making it completely perfect with so much excitement. He passes it around, and as expected, the alchemists love it too. The sour lemon flavor mixed with the bubbly fizz is a total hit, leaving everyone wanting even more. And just like that, our boy's carbonated soda is born. Word of the drink spreads like wildfire, turning it into such a luxury that the people can't get enough of, even outside the borders of Ernesia. Lord Dement, the Earl of the Northern Territories, can't wrap his head around this soda thing Prince Errol has created. He has to double-check with his servant, who confirms it's all thanks to Errol's lead. The drink has turned into a super fancy luxury item and is making bank for the Ernesia kingdom. There are even wild rumors about carriages stuffed with gold showing up at the